only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning.
Welcome to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, where prepping doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Coming to you from a well-defended off-grid compound high in the mountains. Coming to you from his Florida room in Richmond, Virginia. Neither off-grid nor well-defended, unless you count as chickens and cats. Here is your host, Keith.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. My name is Keith, and this is episode 34. Today is February 6th, 2023. Let's just talk about that Chinese spy balloon and get it out of the way. Okay. I cannot believe this thing dominated the news cycle as much as it did, but on the other hand, I can. I think it was Wednesday when it really gained a lot of traction when it was over Montana, part of Montana. And people were speculating where it came from, and it came from China. How long have we known about it? And the first story was, we just found out about it today. Then they had to backtrack. We've known about it since it was over the Aleutian Islands, Alaska, down through Canada. And apparently, at that point, the government, the U.S. military, decided not to shoot it down because of where it might land. I've driven through Montana. I really don't think that if they would have shot it down, that the odds of it landing on somebody's head are probably pretty small. I mean, we can, like, satellites and meteors that come down from space, the space station breaks up, space debris. We know exactly within probably a few hundred feet of where it's going to land, where it makes re-entry, all that stuff. Don't tell me at this big-ass balloon with these solar panels and all these different sensors hanging off of it, don't tell me that we can't pop that thing at 60,000 feet and, given the wind patterns and all that crazy stuff, pretty much decide and pretty much be able to figure out where this thing is going to land. So it floats around, does its thing. Apparently it could be had motors and little fins and rudders. It could be directed to a certain extent. Apparently flew over where we keep our nuclear missiles at, Minot, North South Dakota. We got a bunch of Air Force bases down across Tennessee, out North Carolina, South Carolina, then somewhere Myrtle Beach, Charleston, floats out to sea, and a couple F-22s out of Virginia Beach. Go ahead and one shoots it with a Sidewinder, and it hits the water 6 miles off the coast in 47 feet of water, which it really kind of struck me funny. I'm like, wait, it's 6 miles out, only 47 feet of water. But if you've ever been to the Outer Banks, especially off the coast of North Carolina and South Carolina to a lesser extent, there are sandbars and there are all sorts of things out there. So it surprised me for a second, but then it's not unheard of. Certain areas of the beach in North Carolina, you can just walk and walk and walk, even at high tide sometimes, and at low tide especially. Now, there'll be sections where you'll have to swim, but again, the sandbar and the erosion is just terrible. You can go all sorts of different places, which one reason why that part of the Atlantic is known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, I believe. Many, many ships over the years have run aground and sank and all that good kind of stuff. I used to scuba dive, and there are plenty of wrecks off the coast of North Carolina, plenty of freighters, even some older ships, some submarines, German submarines. I could tell you stories about how close the German submarines, like I was there in World War II. I could tell you stories about the German submarines and basically how they sat off the coast of Virginia, like Virginia Beach, and they could pick up radio, TV, and at night they would surface and they could just sit there and look at the boardwalk. And a lot of times what the U-boats they would just basically sit there and they would wait for a lot of the troop ships and the ships heading over to England, full of supplies and material. They would sit there and wait for those ships to leave. A lot of people don't realize there are a lot of ships that were sunk by German U-boats not very far off the coast of Virginia and North Carolina. I know when I was scuba diving, there was they call a Liberty ship, an old ship that was repurposed to take men and material to England, to Europe during World War II. And it was called the John the John Morgan. And it was an old ship that was outfitted or refurbished into a Liberty ship. How that one sunk, I totally got off topic here. But anyway, squirrel. The ships, when they would leave Hampton Roads, it was radio silence. They were completely blacked out. And at certain times, maybe 15 minutes past the hour, 30 minutes past the hour, once they get in, the captain would get in, he would read the orders, where they were going and how they were getting there. So they'd take a heading out of Hampton Roads, out of the Virginia Beach area, and let's say they would leave at like 9 p.m. Pretty dark. Hopefully it's not a full moon. They're not silhouetted against the horizon. So let's say they leave late, 10 p.m. At like 11:15 exactly, all ships would turn to port like 8 degrees. So you'd have this huge array of ships. And if they did it right, at 15 minutes past the hour, whatever, everybody would turn to the port, 15 degrees. They go that far at 5 knots. And then at 35 minutes later, they turn to the starboard, 12 degrees. And basically they would zigzag to make it a little more difficult for the submarines to hunt them down and to fire torpedoes. But this particular night, I cannot remember the name of the ship that collided with the John Morgan, but it missed its turn. So when everybody else turned back to port, this ship was still going the wrong direction. And when it collided with the John Morgan, they were several miles off Virginia Beach. The explosion was so intense that obviously the people on the beach, on the boardwalk, saw it. The shock wave was so intense that it actually broke windows on the boardwalk. When this ship went down, it was, 200 and some feet long or 300 and some feet long. I'm going to have to look it up now since I've gone completely off the rails here on this tangent. So when I dove it, if you ever dive off the coast of Virginia Beach, even on a good day, you got visibility of about 5 to 8 feet, maybe 10 feet. The water, once you get below the thermoclines, is pretty much about 55 degrees all the way to the bottom. So it's pretty much a 7 mil wetsuit or a dry suit kind of dive. I never got checked out on dry suits, so I just wore a 7 mil wetsuit, tried to stay as warm as I could. So it went down there on the Morgan, and about 115 feet or so to the bottom. It got to the bottom. I saw tanks upside down, Jeeps or parts of Jeeps. And, there's a lot of barnacles and things like that all over it. But it's just amazing the amount of material down there and things that you can still distinguish. It's like motorcycles with sidecars. I can't tell you how many rounds of ammunition, artillery shells, just strewn all over the ocean floor. The ship was pretty much broken in half. So again, there was a nasty current down there that day, really cold, crappy visibility. And the dive master on the boat, when he gave the briefing, made sure that every diver knew not to bring anything up from the wreck. Don't grab a bunch of machine gun rounds or pistol rounds. Don't grab some artillery shell and put it on a lift bag and try to bring it up, because even though that's been underwater for since 1940, 39, 41, whenever the Morgan went down, you don't bring that stuff up. That is still technically a live ordnance. Now, I guess if you went down there, you could take an oil filter wrench and you could crack it open, and assuming it doesn't explode and kill you, I guess you flood the chamber with all the gunpowder, and then it makes it relatively inert. But for the most part, you just leave that stuff alone. And the dive master would not allow anybody on the boat. You come up, tap yourself on the head, give him the okay signal. And then the first thing he would ask, did you bring anything up? Nope, not a thing. And we didn't. So that was a really good dive. And again, I completely went off on a tangent there. Where are we? Okay, the balloon. Now, it was definitely spying on us. We don't know what kind of information it was picking up. And somebody said, I heard them on TV, well, if the Chinese have satellites that can read the license plate off a car going down the interstate, why in the world would they want to literally float this balloon with all this stuff hanging off of it to gather information? Some people will say it did not have the ability of gathering information. Some people say it did. Now, apparently that the wreckage has been recovered in 47 feet of water, 6 miles off the coast of South Carolina. You probably could have walked out there and picked it up. So it will be analyzed, I guess, by the military, by the government. Will we ever know what kind of sensors, what type of technology it was used to My assumption is it would gather whatever it was doing, and then it would beam it up to a satellite relatively close and then back down to China. I doubt there's a bunch of hard drives and they're going to go in and pull a bunch of SD cards out of these cameras, and start looking at the photos that these cameras took. So some people believe it was just put up there literally as a trial balloon, that is a pun intended, just to see what the reaction would be, one, of the current administration, two, of the news media, and three, of just regular Joe six-pack Americans, just to try to gauge the reaction. So we know the government pretty much did nothing till it got off the coast of South Carolina. Then they shot it down, a Sidewinder missile from an F-22, and the news media basically parroted what the administration was saying. Oh, we didn't know. Oh, wait, we did know. Oh, we've known since the Aleutian Islands. And then after we shot it down, then for some reason the narrative turned to, well, there were 3 of these that were floating around the United States during the Trump administration, and Trump did nothing. And that kind of took me by surprise. And then everything I've been reading today is that never happened. Mike Pompeo, who was a Secretary of State, he's been the director of the CIA, I believe. He has no recollection of that. You would think that he would probably have known. And there were a couple of the high-ranking generals under the previous administration, and they're basically saying we had absolutely no idea. Now, the one reason why I believe that is not true, that there were no balloons floating around during the previous administration, is because folks within the administration and folks within the U.S. government, there were so many leaks as well. There were so many leaks of information during the Trump administration, they couldn't really keep anything secret. I mean, it was like a piece of Swiss cheese. There were so many holes and a lot of information that was coming out. So I really believe that if those balloons were floating around and the previous administration was made aware of it, that somewhere between Trump losing the election and definitely prior to these balloons, somebody would have said something just to just to dig on him and his administration even more. But in my opinion, I think the current administration completely dropped the ball, and this is kind of some way of, kind of saving face a little bit, saying, well, yeah, but at least we shot ours down, when the other 3 under the previous administration just floated around and it did whatever they were supposed to be doing. So we shot it down. China came out with they were very, very upset. And they called this a provocation, that we shot down a spy balloon that was in American airspace. So if somebody breaks into your house and you shoot them, obviously somebody somewhere is going to be a little upset, but I really don't think that, say, the family of the person that you had to shoot when they broke into your house wanting to harm you, I doubt if those family members would say, I know Mike broke into your house and he was just floating around your house eating your food and looking for your money and your jewelry. But really, when you shot him or punched him in the nose, that was really a provocation. That was completely uncalled for. Just like the balloon, it was just going to float around and it was just going to float right off and, I don't know, maybe float back to China. See, just like Mike when he broke into your house. He was just going to float around, go into your fridge, get all your Hot Pockets, maybe dig through some loose change between the seat cushions. I mean, he wasn't there to do any harm, and it was really unnecessary, and it was a complete overreaction for you to shoot Mike or punch Mike in the nose. That's how China views us shooting down their spy balloon. So there are a lot of people that are very upset about potentially being spied on by the Chinese. Some of these people are the same people that use TikTok that have absolutely no qualms or concerns about their personal information and their privacy. Now, the balloon did not come over Virginia as far as I know. I'm in Richmond. But who knows, maybe their cameras or sensors reached over here to Virginia. So as far as I know, the big balloon wasn't spying on me in my backyard and the chickens, but I don't have TikTok. But if I had TikTok and I was posting and watching videos and doing all that, I knew for sure that TikTok has access to my phone number, my date of birth, obviously my profile information of that social media platform and every other social media platform. They have access to my photos, my passwords, my email addresses. It tracks the keystrokes, basically what you're texting, what you're typing in, therefore your passwords. So when your internet history, so when you click on, I don't know, Bank of America, and then you go to the login and you type in whatever your account and then whatever your last name is, that's your username. And then under the password, this is my password 123, they now have that. Now, are people in China or whomever they sell this information to, are you going to come home one day and your bank account is going to be drained? I don't know. I do know that, and someone I know personally had their debit card compromised. Not sure where, it was a card reader or what happened, but it is not beyond the realm of possibility that hackers with access to all the information that they have on this person's phone through TikTok, certainly within the realm of possibility that information was compromised and then used. Who knows? Did the debit card, was it a card reader at a 7-Eleven or a gas station? Who knows? But that information is definitely accessible by the folks at TikTok. And no, there's good people that work for TikTok and there's bad people that work for TikTok, just like every other company out there. Your contact list, your browsing history, any texts or anything that you have copy and pasted onto your clipboard, if you use the clipboard on your phone, your biometric information, basically like your Face ID. I don't know, what do you call that when you can unlock your phone or get into your bank account just with your face, whatever. You put your face up to it and it reads your face. And then your voice print. So when you say to Alexa or Siri, you talk to them and it learns your speech, it learns your speech pattern. So it basically it knows it's you and it recognizes what you say. So China is not our friend, and we know that. I'm concerned that all the information that the Chinese are gathering through TikTok and through everything else, not just TikTok, but that's certainly a very easy way to do that they're using this information against us, building social profiles. And as I adjust my tinfoil hat, let's couple the balloon. Let's say it was spying. Let's say it's not. Let's say it's just out there so the Chinese can gauge the reaction of all these different people, all these different departments, all these different administrations. They can watch the TV and they can listen to the news presenters. They can go on all sorts of social media and watch and listen what people are saying. And I really think you call it psychological warfare. Definitely not welfare, psychological warfare, that all this information is being gathered and it's thrown into a machine and it's just crunching numbers, it's crunching algorithms. And I think that the Chinese are putting together some sort of profile of the American people. And what if this balloon was exactly that? What if they had all this information and they're like, you know what? We're going to get this big balloon and we're going to tie a bunch of solar panels to it and stick a bunch of cameras on it. And we're just going to float this silly thing down into the United States across Canada. I think that they're going to react like this. And they list a few things. And some other folks over there in the military or whatever, the CCP might say, I think they might react like this. What if this was just truly an experiment? What if this was just a trial balloon that they floated out there just to see how we react? So the trial balloon was over the United States for several days. What if the next trial balloon really is spying on us? What if the next trial balloon has an EMP device? And none of this is out of the question at all. Again, China's not our friend. You can go on their websites. You can find all sorts of information. They make no bones about the fact that they would love to take down America. They have social credit, digital currency. I think I talked about that before. Anyway, I think there's a whole lot more than just this big balloon floating around with a bunch of solar panels and cameras on it. I think they didn't do it just for kicks. I think there's certainly a method to their madness. Okay, we're going to talk about Turkey. Oh my goodness. The earthquake over there was like a 7.8, a 7.9. One of the aftershocks was a 7.6. One of the aftershocks was almost as strong as the major part of the earthquake. People here in the States might complain about building codes and building inspectors, and this is the reason why we do this and do that. If you saw some of the videos of some of these buildings coming down, they were nothing but just fancy mud huts for the most part. When I saw some of these buildings come down, there was very little structure. There were very little structural integrity or bones or whatever you want to call it to keep these buildings up. I didn't see any steel. I didn't see any huge girders. I saw a few supports here and there. But just think about the people that live away from the cities. Think about the people that literally live in, homemade homes. They take scrap wood, clay, dirt, just anything they can find, and they put together what they call a home. I can't imagine the number of people that are going to have that have perished in this earthquake. A news report a few minutes ago, 3,800 people. That is going to go way, way up, especially when the rescuers and the folks get further out into the country and, to see the folks that were really hit by this. So definitely a very, very, very bad scene. So, which caused me to go to our friends at the CDC and just look to see what they have as far as an earthquake plan. And this shouldn't really come as a surprise, but they suggest that you do an evacuation plan, which makes sense in the case of a fire, a tree hitting the home, a major storm coming through, that you should practice evacuation. Given any place that you're in the house, I'm in my bedroom, how am I getting out? Oh, the family, we're in the family room, how are we getting out? We're at the kitchen and something happens, how are we getting out? We're all spread out doing our own thing late at night. Where do each of us escape? Now, once you escape, you need to have a place to meet. So we're going to meet out by the chicken coop. We're going to meet outside in the backyard by the big old oak tree. Because given a situation, you don't want to be running around the house screaming everybody's name when the person's on the other side of the house screaming your name. So find one place to meet and then give it a few minutes. And then if someone doesn't show up, you're going to have to go back in. I almost said you'll have to decide on whether you're going to go back in. Trust me, as a parent, and I'm sure you guys are the same way, if a child or a young adult or whatever, anybody, your significant other is not at the old oak tree in the backyard, we're going back in to get them. Okay, so when an earthquake happens, you should drop, cover, and hold. Not to be confused when you're on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. Don't get those confused because it's going to be bad either way. So you drop down to your hands and knees, get kind of small, try to cover your head if you can with something, and just try to get in the fetal position and, maybe under a table, in a door jamb if you can. Obviously stay away from, grandma's china cabinet if it comes over on you. You could be in the fetal position and that's only going to help. But so much, try to hold on as best you can. I've been in 2 separate earthquakes and, here in Central Virginia, and they were not fun. Any folks out in California, out west, or any other folks living in the world in an earthquake-prone area, you know what I'm talking about. As far as food and water resources, the same thing, a 3-day kit, the same as like a natural disaster, a tornado. They suggest the 3-day kit. I know we have talked about that before. And it even goes a little bit further, like an emergency supply kit for your vehicle, an axe, a shovel, a broom, a tow rope, some boots or sturdy shoes, work gloves, a fire extinguisher, and a whistle. Pretty interesting. So that is from the CDC. And I didn't go to FEMA. I went to the CDC just on purpose, just to see how their information would differ from FEMA. Okay, now, how does the Chinese, the balloon, and some other things, how do I tie this back into what I do for prepping and how other people view prepping? So the spy balloon is one thing. And obviously, you want to prepare for an earthquake, your 3-day plan, certain things like that. But this is how I'll tie it back. When I see things like this, it makes me very nervous about the real reason, the real rationale behind in this case, what the Chinese are doing. I know that given the circumstances we just had, the balloon was allowed to travel across the United States, off the coast, then we shot it down. The current administration, the government, the military did nothing to stop what we think the balloon was doing, which is spying. That does not give me the warm and fuzzies when something else might happen. Granted, a natural disaster, earthquake, wildfires, internet down, power grid down, really no comparison to, this spy balloon. However, again, to me, it's just kind of a microcosm of the entire situation. If the grid was to go down, if there was an EMP and we lose internet and the ability to drive our vehicles, nobody's coming to help you. There isn't like a little mini FEMA, down the street or a few miles away going, oh, there's been an EMP. Oh, there's been a natural disaster. Let's go to Keith's house. So nobody is coming to help me, especially if there's an EMP, civil unrest, grid down situation. I am going to have to take care of myself and my family and those folks that I've decided to help outside my family. Imagine, if you would, let's say Manhattan, New York City, Manhattan, one of the 5 boroughs. So you have Manhattan. It is so densely populated. All you have is apartments and high rises that go straight up in the air that hold several thousand people. As far as I know, there's not a Kroger or a Walmart on every corner or every other corner. Well, there's a Starbucks on every corner, but you can only drink so much coffee in a disaster. But people in New York, most of them don't have vehicles because there's no place to park. And they certainly can't afford parking in the parking garage underneath the skyscraper, the apartment buildings, whatever. So there's a lot of people who don't have cars. They don't need it. They have public transportation. And these people go to these little shops, these little bodegas on the way home. Oh, let me get some salami, some cheese, some rice. I'll eat this, a couple nights leftovers. I don't think a lot of people in like Manhattan get on a bus or whatever, get on the train and go out to the suburbs and go to these huge grocery stores and stock up for a few weeks. So you have a lot of people in a very densely populated area, very confined space for the most part. What happens when the grid goes down? What happens if there's an EMP? What happens if there is a major supply chain issue? Where are these people going to go to get food, and how are they going to get there? Trains aren't running. Buses aren't running. Let's say there's some cars running. It'd be like that scene from, was it War of the Worlds? The one with Tom Cruise, the remake, where he's in that little minivan and all these people are like trying to get into his minivan so they can get, I don't know, where are they going? Down the street or across the bridge or something. If you don't think that in that type of situation, if you don't think that people are going to look out for themselves and throw you out of the way and hurt you or kill you to get behind the wheel to be able to drive the minivan however far they're going to drive it, you're sorely mistaken. When people are backed into a corner, when you're talking about survival, food and water for their family, they will absolutely kill you to get the Snickers bar out of your pocket. So when I think about a densely populated area like Manhattan, there is going to be a lot of trouble. These folks are going to have to get out of the city. They got to get out of the city quickly, and they're going to use whatever means of transportation is available to do that. There's not going to be a bunch of buses on the corner. All right, everybody, get in a nice orderly line. We're going to fill up this bus, then we'll go to the second bus. No, somebody's going to grab the bus driver. They're going to jerk him out of the seat, and they're going to take the bus and go over wherever they think they need to go to get the food and water to support themselves or their family, whatever the situation. Nobody's coming to help all those people in all those high rises in New York City. Folks in rural America, a little bit easier, but still the situation remains the same. If you're in a huge neighborhood, let's say you have 100 homes. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 of those homes have enough food for 3 days or 7 days or 10 days. Maybe 1 out of 100 of those homes have someone that has done their homework and committed some time and money and effort to long-term food storage. You may not know who that person is. My neighbor may have 6 years of food in their basement. I have no idea. I mean, I know they don't, but you just don't know. There'll be whole neighborhoods where nobody has got themselves set up with food and water. Now, remember, I've said this before. 90% of the people out there do not have enough food and water on hand to last 3 days. I know that sounds kind of weird. If you're not into prepping or long-term food storage, just think it for a second. Okay. If I had not done anything, I'm just thinking right now, in my fridge, I've got yogurt, I've got pickles, I've got lunch meat, I've got some cheese, I've got some bread, some butter, some sour cream that's probably rancid and all sorts of green things growing out of it. On the freezer side, that's frozen. That's going to be tough. But, let's say I don't have a grill. Let's say I don't have an alternate source of cooking my food. Well, let's see. There's some salmon burgers. I got to try those. I got those at Costco last month. I have salmon burgers, some frozen vegetables, some chicken, some ice cream. I would have to eat the ice cream before it melted. I would definitely do that. So I've got some ice cream. And in the cupboard, just some soups and stuff like that. For me, I could. That would probably get me through 3 days. Now, water, let's say I didn't have any water stored. I don't have any. I've got the water that I've obviously stored in case I need it, but just take that away. There's a couple, some like spring water or something like that. Some of the fizzy flavored water. I've got some of that. But again, nobody's coming to help you, folks. You are going to have to rely on yourself. Rely on your friends or your family if this is kind of a mutual hobby. If you have made friends in the neighborhood, in the town, in the city, across town, through whatever social media groups, you talk to somebody at work and they're like, whoa, what did you say about prepping or what that, freeze dryer or what? Maybe they've got a freeze dryer. Maybe they got a dehydrator. I don't hunt or fish because I don't have the patience, but maybe the person that overheard me at work talk about a freeze dryer and my freeze dried Skittles and banana chips, maybe they walk over and go, freeze dryer? Is that like a dehydrator? I'm like, no. I freeze dry Skittles and I got banana chips and pineapple rings and, I freeze dried a few things. Wait a second. Do you have like a chest freezer full of like chicken and pork chops and stuff like that? And let's say I did. I'm like, well, yeah. Why do you have that? Well, in case I need it, in case, there's a situation where the power goes out. You're not one of them preppers, are you? And then that's how the conversation starts. And then you may have just made a contact. Let's say this person loves to hunt or fish. Let's say this person is like, hey, that whole freeze dryer thing, if I give you 50 pounds of whatever, of venison, do you mind freeze drying that? And that 50 pounds, why don't you keep 10? And there's a win-win. So you'd be surprised the contacts you can make, and you'd be surprised at the people, in your general area that may be into the same thing you are, certainly to a different extent. You'll never know. But anyway, it's going to be up to you to take care of yourself and your family. The government's not going to come help you. Speaking of which, let's talk about freeze dryers. What is in my freeze dryer? In the last 10 days, I've done 3 rounds of banana chips. They're absolutely tasty. I sliced up some potatoes, like baked potatoes. They were like russet potatoes, I think. Sliced them kind of thin and ran 4 trays of those and put those in a vacuum seal bag. And those are going to be used as an ingredient with some, like meals in a jar or soups in a jar, a mason jar, several YouTube videos. You put in the freeze-dried, ham, turkey, sausage, hamburger, whatever. And then the potatoes, the freeze-dried carrots, whatever, the spices and everything. And then you vacuum seal it, throw an oxygen absorber. And then in the end, hot water in the little jar thingy, and you've got yourself, a meal, got yourself some soup, macaroni, whatever you want to make. So I tried one just to see, how much of the moisture was out of it. It was like I put a piece of chalk in my mouth, which I guess is a good thing in a way because I know the moisture's out. But literally, as soon as I put it into my mouth, the entire piece of potato soaked up every single part of saliva I had in my mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, and wiping it off my face. And I'm like, I just ate a piece of chalk. Anyway, I know there's no moisture in it. Went ahead and vacuum sealed those, and those are good to go. So bananas, we got the potatoes that taste like chalk, and I'm getting ready to put some more bananas here tomorrow night. Yeah, some of the bananas are not ripe enough. I got 4 trays going in, and 2 trays I was able to slice up the bananas today, and there's only about 6 or 8 bananas ready to go. And I may have to wait till tomorrow night or maybe Wednesday before those other bananas are going to be ripe enough for me to, what do? The peel? Take it out of the peel? The skin? Yeah. It might be a couple of days where I can peel the bananas and cut them up and put them on the trays with the rest of them. All right, folks, the gas, price of gas in Central Virginia down a few cents, $3.40, $3.42, about down about 10 cents since the last time we spoke. Everything else, inflation is still plugging along. We added a few more jobs to the job market in January than they thought, which not a bad thing. Certainly not the panacea we were all hoping for, but more people at work. Interesting to see what the housing bubble is going to do. And the Fed's raised interest rates, so not a good thing. So anyway, thank you for hanging out. I went a little long. I might put chapter markers on this for the John Morgan scuba diving story. Maybe skip minute 8 through 19 if you don't want to hear about me scuba diving off Virginia Beach and the history of the John Morgan and all that good kind of stuff. But anyway, folks, thank you so much. And again, every single week as I look at the metrics, every single week, more and more listeners, more and more downloads, more and more cities, states, and countries checking in. I really, 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 really do appreciate it. Again, I'm on the Twitter. Search Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast or prep_podcast. My email, practicalpreppodcast@gmail.com. And as always, everybody, please stay safe out there. Take care of one another. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review.